2025 was a year that reminded us just how powerful and how vulnerable we are when it comes to weather. Hurricane Melissa slammed into Jamaica as a Category 5, the strongest storm ever recorded to hit the island, with wind gusts from dropsondes reaching 252 miles per hour. In Texas, catastrophic flash flooding in July claimed dozens of lives and was one of the deadliest inland floods in U.S. history. An EF5 tornado tore through Enderlin, North Dakota in June, and the Los Angeles wildfires in January became the costliest on record, exceeding $60 billion in damages. But 2025 wasn't just about the storms themselves. NOAA lost hundreds of employees to layoffs, causing disruption to weather balloon launches across numerous National Weather Service offices. At the same time, NOAA also rolled out a groundbreaking suite of AI-driven global weather models that can produce long-range forecasts in a fraction of the time required by traditional computers. The stories we told this year sit at the intersection of it all: the chaos of extreme weather, the innovation of pushing forecasting forward, and the people on the front lines, those living through these events and those trying to understand why it's all happening. Today we're going off the radar to revisit those moments and take a look back at this monumental year in both weather and for this podcast. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracey, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do. Welcome to this very special episode of Off the Radar. It's the end of the year, which means it's time to look back at the incredible scientists, researchers, and innovators we've had the privilege of talking to over the last 12 months. It's also been a monumental year for this podcast. In 2025, Off the Radar won its first major awards, including a National Headliner Award for Best Information Podcast, and I was honored to receive the Women's Podcast Award for Best Science Podcast Host. These are milestones I couldn't have reached without our associate producer, Brian Pietrus, who's been in the trenches with me every single episode. In just a moment, Brian will join me to count down our favorite episodes of the year. In a year marked by devastating hurricanes, historic flooding, powerful tornadoes, catastrophic wildfires, major disruptions to weather data collection, and revolutionary advances in AI forecasting, we talked to the people at the front lines of understanding and predicting our changing planet. Today, we're revisiting the conversations that stuck with us, the research that blew our minds, and the projects that deserve more attention than they're getting. Also, make sure you stick around to the very end of this episode because I'm saving my absolute favorite project of the year for last. It's the moment that meant the most to me, and I wanted to share it with you one more time. Thank you to all of our Off the Radar listeners. Have a wonderful new year and stay tuned for brand new episodes in 2026. Welcome to the final episode of Off the Radar for the year. Did I scare you there for a minute, Brian?
A little bit, yeah. It's my favorite show. Can't drop it on me like that.
Oh, yay. I knew you were the right person to bring on for this wrap-up of 2025. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Emily?
I'm good. I'm really glad to talk to you today and reminisce on some of our favorite episodes of 2025. For those who don't know you, they hear me say your name every week, and you've even guest hosted some episodes of Off the Radar in 2025. Brian Pietrus, associate producer of Off the Radar. Thanks for coming on today and chatting with me.
Thanks for having me, Emily. Always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. We work together a lot, but we don't often get to record together. So it's always nice to do that. So looking forward to hearing your top 10 list for Off the Radar episodes of 2025. We did this last year. I recorded last year with Andrew Buck-Michael, who's a fellow Sinclair meteorologist. He's a big fan of the show. So he had his top 10 last year, but I thought who better this year to bring on than somebody who was deeply involved with the show this year. I think you kind of started working on Off the Radar maybe, like a little over a year ago, a year and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, I think like sometime last fall in 2024. So it's been a real treat. It was hard, honestly, to narrow down to top 10 because it's just such a fun show. Every week I feel like I learn something new, and it's tough to narrow that down.
I feel the same way. I feel very lucky that every week I get to sit here with somebody who I admire and can teach me something, and a different guest in a different expertise every week. It's very self-indulgent sometimes on my part, where I'm like, I want to learn about this, so we're going to do an episode about this. But it kind of morphed too over the past couple of years from being a podcast about weather to being a podcast for science lovers, because we have everything. We're doing earth science, we're doing ocean science, we do a lot of space because I like space and I know you do too. So we just kind of pull these different interesting things. And I know since you've been on the show too, we've worked in some more environmental stories because your background is very environmental. So I love the expertise that you're bringing to the table too. Can you I think people don't fully understand your background. Mine comes from weather and meteorology, but can you explain what your undergraduate background is?
I had a real weird path to my career to where I am now. I did my undergrad in environmental biology. I, a lifetime ago, briefly worked with the National Park Service for a little bit. So environmental stuff was really my main passion for a long time. And the job market got tough in that field, but in all fields, it was around the time of the big recession. So I went back to school for creative writing, and science and writing have always been kind of hand in hand, my main passions and my main interests. So nice to get to combine them on a fun show like this.
Yeah, you smush those together and you've got really the perfect makings for a podcast, because that's what we do. We're science and we're writing. So yay. You work a lot on the true crime side of things as well, right? So you get to dip your toes in everything here.
I do. Yeah. I work in true crime side at Sinclair, and I also do news and politics. I worked on a lifestyle kind of chat show as well here at Sinclair. So, I like to stay busy and keep things interesting. So
Cool. Well, let's keep people on their toes today and talk about our favorite episodes of 2025 for Off the Radar. So I'm very curious to see what you have, but should I start with my number 10?
Yeah, take us away.
Okay, my number 10 is Santorini's Seismic Swarm, which this episode was sparked because I went to Santorini and then I came home and there was all this news about how it was rumbling. And so, of course, Santorini, if you don't know it, in Greece, it's an old volcano. It's basically just a sitting empty volcano. So there was all this buzz of will Santorini erupt again? And obviously it didn't. But I learned so much about volcanoes. I had no idea what I didn't know about volcanoes until that episode. I just thought it was so fascinating, and the guest was fantastic. He was a great communicator, and I just had a lot of fun with that episode. So
yeah, that was a great episode. I was just thinking, next time you got to do it the opposite way. You've got to do the episode and then be able to expense the trip as a work expense. Yeah,
we'll see how that goes. Okay, well, tell me what your number 10 is.
My number 10 was Wave Watchers, the Science of Tsunamis. So I found it really interesting. I've lived in coastal areas for the last 10 years. I was in Los Angeles the last 10 years, and now moved to New York City last year. And so, in California, you'd always see signs along the coast about tsunami evacuation zones. And even before I really knew what the risks were or how tsunamis really work, it kind of freaked me out. And so I found this episode just so fascinating and educational. I have realized that my favorite episodes of Off the Radar are the ones where something scary and mysterious gets demystified. So I thought this was a great episode where it was very informative about the phenomenon, and also had some, good safety tips for staying safe.
And if I recall, I think that was, if not one of the first episodes of 2025, kind of on the heels of that 20th anniversary of the 2004 tsunami in Indonesia. So
yeah, that December episode was so fascinating that this came on the heels of getting to talk to, getting to hear from someone who survived it was unreal. So it was a cool kind of two-parter to, hear the survivor story and then kind of learn the science of tsunamis and, how to stay safe and how to get away from those evacuation zones when something happens. So,
all right, my number 9 is an episode you're familiar with. It is all about sharks. I loved this episode because the interview was good, but really my favorite part was your narration at the beginning.
Thank you.
Because it became very apparent, like, you're a great writer, but then also you're a great tracker, like tracking that. I remember listening to it. I remember where I was when I was listening to it, and I had goosebumps because I was like, oh my gosh, Brian is so good at this. It was just such a really personal but heartfelt and interesting narration at the beginning.
The ocean is ancient, its depths are unfathomable, and its inhabitants can seem equally mysterious. The number one animal that comes to mind? Sharks. I'll never forget the first time I watched the movie Jaws. I was way too young for it, but my dad let me watch it with him anyway. One of the main characters, Quint, famously said, "The thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes." It was a haunting description. I wasn't able to look at a shark's features the same way again.
So I loved that episode.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Emily. It was my first time ever recording anything, so I was really, really nervous. I must have re-recorded and listened to it about a dozen times. So yeah, I was very in my head about it, but it was really fun to work on.
Cool. All right, what's your number 9?
I wasn't sure how to do this because it was a two-parter, so I kind of lumped this as 9 and 8.
I have one of these two on my list, so go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, it was Evolving Everest parts 1 and 2. You know, we talk about climate change causing ice at the poles to melt, but we don't really talk much about alpine glaciers and ice bodies melting. And I just found this so interesting, the way, you know, we're uncovering pieces of the past and learning more as ice melts. And, you know, climate change is such a devastating thing and there's so much to talk about in that field, but this was such an interesting element of it that we never really hear about. And I thought it worked out so well, you know, as we were talking just now about two-parters, to have one episode dedicated to the experience of a climber and then a second partnered episode dedicated to glaciologists. And I mean, this one has a century-old mystery about who first climbed Mount Everest. It was just such a cool combo of episodes for me. I loved it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I had forgotten about that intro that we did about Mallory and Irvine. So cool. At 28,000 feet above sea level, the wind howls across Mount Everest's northeast ridge. It's June 8th, 1924, and two men are making their final push for the summit. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine disappear into the clouds, never to be seen alive again. Their last known possession, a pocket camera that could prove they were the first humans to reach the top of the world. For 75 years, the mountain has kept its secrets. Then, in 1999, Mallory's perfectly preserved body emerged from the ice. Last year, a single boot, confirmed to be Irvine's, surfaced from the melting glacier. These aren't isolated discoveries. As global temperatures rise, Everest glaciers are retreating, revealing the frozen history of mountaineering's greatest mystery. And, you know, it occurred to me, too, we need to check back in and do a follow-up episode with that scientist, that glaciologist, Duncan Quincy, I think his name was, because his team was going to put weather stations on Everest this past spring. So we need to check back in with him and see, like, how that went.
Absolutely.
And if they were successful and what kind of ratings they get. So good reminder there.
Great recall on the guest's name. Oh my gosh, I feel like my brain
I can do it sometimes. Sometimes, Brian. Other times I don't even remember like full episodes. Like I will say, let's do an episode on this and completely forget that we've already done that. So, all right. You ready for my number 8?
I'm ready.
All right. My number 8 is Anchor Moms Reflect on Hurricane Helene.
That was a big one. I have that on my list as well, a little further down.
I think this one I liked for one because Katie and Karen are so great. And Anchor Moms is no longer in production, but the episodes are still there. So I highly recommend, especially if you're a parent, to go back and listen to their episodes. They're just such a great duo. They're heartfelt. They lived through Hurricane Helene in Asheville, and their parents and their news anchors. And so they had great insight into, what you need to survive a hurricane with your family.
I think it's changed me as a mom just because it's something that I never thought I would live through and have to help my children navigate through. I'm going to get emotional. It was really scary and it was a really tough time. And I think it's hard to process that and go through that as an adult, but then you're also trying to help your children go through that. When it's hard for you as a 40-something-year-old, it's hard for these kids who are 5, 6, 8, who are also realizing something big and terrible has happened. And what do we do now?
It was weather. It was a human story. It was all the things I love about Off the Radar kind of combined into one, that human interest story plus the weather and the teaching about weather. So that was my number 8.
That was a good one. That was a really powerful one for sure.
Cool. So do you not have a number 8 because of your smushed together?
Exactly. I'm sorry.
All good. Because you want to know what my number 7 is?
What's your number 7?
Everest.
Perfect.
So,
well, which one?
But I cheated. But I put them both into number 7. That was my cheating. I mean, I guess probably. And if you didn't listen to them, one of them is an interview with Scott Thuman about his hike to base camp. And then it was supposed to be one episode. And his story was so great. And then the scientist, Duncan Quincy, he was so great as well. So we wound up splitting it into 2 episodes so they wouldn't be too long. So highly recommend everybody goes back and listens to that. It's kind of an evolving story, not only with the melting glacier, but also with that boot that they recovered. And, they're still trying to figure out who climbed Everest first. So ongoing dilemma there. But okay, well, do you have a number 7?
I do. My number 7 was Rip Currents, Tech Tools for Survival. Similar to the tsunami episode, rip currents just really scare me. Every time I go in the water.
They should. They're scary.
They are, yes. Isn't it one of the number 1 causes of water fatalities?
And in hurricanes, it's one of the biggest killers when it comes to hurricane fatalities. So when we were talking about hurricanes as a whole, rip currents continue to kill people, whereas all the other deaths are kind of going down from storm surge and inland flooding.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's every time I go into the water, especially at the ocean, I'm always reminding myself, swim parallel to the shore. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, I've never had to use that, but it was just this episode was just another really good one where something scary and universally heard of, but maybe not universally known or understood was, broken down with really applicable safety advice, which is, I think, like I said, my favorite category of Off the Radar episodes.
Cool. Well, hopefully it brought you some comfort.
It did, definitely.
Well, let's move into number 6. And number 6 is a recent episode for me. It was space debris, which this episode was so fascinating to me. The more I learned, and the guest, Jonathan McDowell, I just Googled space debris and I found him and I saw some YouTube videos with him and I reached out and he immediately responded and was like, yes. And I couldn't have picked a better guest because this guy is the most knowledgeable person on space debris. He has to be in the world. He was fantastic. So I learned so much from him just about what's floating around up there, the long-term plan, whether we should be concerned about stuff falling from the sky on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So very, very fascinating.
That was a wild one. Like I said, there was too many to pick. So it didn't make my list, but I did really enjoy working on that one and listening to that one. He was such a great guest, and it's a very relevant topic that it seems is only going to become more relevant as time goes on.
Yeah. And that story about the Tesla in space and Elon Musk was just wild to me. It sounded made up.
I know. It's stranger than fiction. It was wild.
Earlier this year, the Minor Planet Center at Harvard announced the discovery of an unusual asteroid, designation 2018 CN41. A citizen scientist spotted it first, and here's what made it notable. It came within 150,000 miles of Earth, making it a near-Earth object. 17 hours later, the Minor Planet Center deleted it from their records because it wasn't an asteroid at all. It was a Tesla. Elon Musk had strapped a car to the front of a rocket and shot it into space, and now it's just out there, drifting, one more object in an increasingly crowded void. All right, what do you have for number 6?
Number 6, I had deadly debris flows. Like I said, I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, and out west, and especially in Southern California, wildfires are unfortunately just kind of a part of life. They happen every year. There's wildfire season, and you would logically think, great, there's rain coming after all the fires. This is going to like re-dampen the soil, re-wet the plants. It's going to prevent future, further fires. And it just causes so much further devastation. I think it's been a while since I've listened to it, but I think actually more devastation typically and property damage or death than the actual fires, which is just wild. I luckily never witnessed them myself, but I saw their aftermath many times in California, especially in canyons and in the mountains. And it just was such an interesting topic that, again, it's this piece of the larger story that doesn't really get talked about or I think really understood enough.
And, as scary as that one was, it was comforting to know that there are these new tools that are helping with it. And with that one, the National Severe Storms Laboratory is using mobile radars to kind of track where these heavy downpours could be and where debris flows could be. So they're doing a lot of work in that area, which is great.
All right. What do you got for number 5?
Number 5 is, and this one, talk about scary and like being so scared during an episode. The recount of the Hurricane Hunter flight into Hurricane Hugo in 1989 and being classified as the most turbulent Hurricane Hunter flight of all time. September 15th, 1989, a NOAA P-3 Hurricane Hunter aircraft is flying directly into the eye wall of Hurricane Hugo. Satellite data indicates that it's likely a Category 3 hurricane. The team makes a decision to gather the best data and enter the hurricane at a low altitude, just 1,500 feet. Getting close to the eye, they realize this was a mistake. What happens next will go down as the most terrifying, most violent ride in hurricane hunting history.
The nose is in a downdraft, the tail is in an updraft, and at the same time, the plane is skidding sideways because the wind is dropping off so quickly. The pilot lost control of the aircraft, and right at this moment, the number 3 engine bursts into fire.
This is the story of that flight and the recent research behind measuring just how brutal it really was. So listening to him tell that story and then also listening to Josh talk about the new data that shows that was indeed the most turbulent flight. And this episode came out in the spring, I think. I'm curious too, like there have been some pretty turbulent flights in the 2025 season. So I'd like to check back in with them and see what those bumpiness factors are for some of the more recent storms like Melissa.
Yeah, that would be a great one to do a follow-up on. That episode was wild. They're not living in our reality. A normal day at work for them is like an action thriller movie for most of us,
Yeah. It makes my nervousness on a Southwest flight seem ridiculous in comparison. Okay, well, what do you have for number 5?
Number 5, I had When the Lights Went Out, the anchor moms reflect on Helene. Not much more I can add to it other than to say it was just felt like such an important episode. This was really devastating to hear about, not just a story of survival in Hurricane Helene, but also a story of trying to keep your kids safe in the midst of it, including emotionally safe. My heart really breaks for obviously not just people living through a natural disaster, but trying to make your kids not scared in the middle of all of that. This was just such a great episode that I felt was very emotionally powerful and just felt like a really important episode.
I agree. And a good reminder too that hurricanes come with wind and rain, but sometimes the worst part of it is the darkness afterwards. For, in their case, weeks, they were without power. So that can be just as dangerous. Okay, my number 4 was another kind of emotional episode, and that was the one about the life and career of Jim Cantori, who, I've known Jim for a long time. And so we had kind of talked about like, let's do a podcast episode, but he needed to get permission from the Weather Channel. We needed to get on the same schedule. We wound up recording it, I think at like 7 p.m. one night. So we finally got on the same page, but he was just so honest kind of about, personal things in his life that affected his career and has affected, how he operates. And it was a really fun, but also just a great just insight into what it's like to be a meteorologist for 30 years in the public eye.
There's so many good ones. We're getting hit after hit here.
Well, what do you have for number 4?
My number 4, I had Silenced Science. That's a tongue twister. Inside NOAA's Communication Challenge. This one was very important to me. I think to anyone working in science, there's so much happening in our government right now. And I know, we're not explicitly a political show, but I think this topic is so important to talk about and for people to understand what's going on in their government and what our elected officials are doing to our understanding of science and of the world. Really, it was just, again, felt like a really timely episode that felt really important.
Yep, I agree. It was great to get the insights from 2 former NOAA scientists. These were not people who were bitter or angry. These were people that were informed and science first. And so they were also both great communicators. So it was really nice to hear from both of them and to hear them talk with each other and kind of brainstorm some ideas of like, people need to know about science. How do we get people to know about science? Let's put the past behind us of whatever, has gone wrong, but let's move forward and show the world what NOAA is doing and what all scientists are doing. So, yep, I'm glad that you had that because it didn't quite make my list, but it was one of my favorites too.
All right, top 3.
Man, and I loved looking at these because it made me so happy to remember putting these episodes together and how much I got out of these episodes personally. And I'm just so appreciative of the guests that we've had on this show too. And with that being said, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world is on my number 3 episode. And it was Kim Cloco McLean, and it was after the flood. And it was all about the Texas flooding and the watches and warning system and communication and what can be done differently. Kim is a social scientist, and she's also just like a super amazing human being. Anybody who's ever met her or had a conversation with her adores her and respects her. So I was thrilled to be able to get her on the podcast, to get her insights, get her emotion. She's a mother. And so to hear the stories from these, families that dealt with this, it weighed heavily on her. And I think that's important for scientists to have that emotional touch when making decisions, because it helps us know, that the forecasts we make, the decisions we make, the communication style we have, it affects people, it affects lives. So that was a good reminder of that. It was a hard one to put together. It was one of those where I think I may have cried a couple times during the editing process, but it was just a really important episode to me.
You're a mother, I'm a mother, and I think this one hit particularly hard. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into why we're feeling this disaster perhaps more than others. I think when children are involved, it just always hurts so much more. Each disaster can have a different profile of the kind of attention that it raises. And some of the features of disasters that make people really uncomfortable are things that seem uncontrollable, beyond the state of the science, or when they affect something that is very close to our hearts. And that is certainly the case with the children. It's very hard. It's been very hard for me personally and professionally as a mother of children who are that age. I look at that and I think, what could I do so that my own children would survive this? Would my children have survived this? Would I have even known? Could I have been just like those parents? And it's that sense of social nearness, that's, that identifiability that makes this hard for everyone. And there's an extra layer, I think, for those of us in this field, because we feel like we should be able to change this. It's on our shoulders to change it. And so we spin in circles, even more than other people. Everyone, I think, is trying to figure out how do we make this better. We all want to have that sense of controllability.
And we feel the burden of, it's our responsibility. These disasters are nonpartisan. They happen to everyone, and they happened to children at a camp in Texas, and we all feel it. And we all recognize it's our responsibility to do everything we can to empower anyone who's able to make a difference to do so.
It was just such a tragic event, and it was very powerful to have someone who, like you say, can speak to both the science side and the emotional side weighing in on it. Was a really unique perspective that I think was really hit really hard.
It did. Yep. All right. What did you have for number 3?
My number 3 was sharks. Shark myth
Yay!
versus reality. Maybe a little biased on this one, but it was just
That's the whole point. That's why we're doing this, to be indulgent on what we like.
It was just such a fun episode to research and to conduct the interview. Like I'd said earlier, some of my favorite episodes are the ones that can demystify a scary unknown thing, and sharks are it for me. I've always been really freaked out by them ever since I was a kid. I think of them as living dinosaurs, but they also
me too.
They also fascinate me. They're so wild and so ancient. And Greg Metzger was such a wonderful guest, and my interview with him really gave me some solid information, and I felt very comforted with that information. I actually swam in the ocean quite a bit this summer. Honestly, I think more times this summer than like the past few years combined. I just wouldn't shut up about sharks all summer, especially when we'd be going to the beach with friends. I'd be telling friends, and less relevant now in December, but I would always be telling people, stay in groups in the water, don't go out alone, limit your time in the water. If you see seagulls diving in the water or lots of fish jumping out of the water, get out real fast. So it was a fun one that really was a highlight for me of the year.
Well, my number 2 was almost my number 1, but it got bumped. But it really, truly was a top contender for number 1. And this was my interview with Adam Met from the band AJR. And it was all about climate communications, because he's the bassist in this band with his brothers, AJR. But he's also a climate scientist. And I discovered this while at a concert. And I was like, I got to get that guy on the podcast. And it took a while, but we got him on. Fortunately, he was trying to promote a new book, which always helps entice people to come on. But it was just so, for one, I was starstruck. And 2, he and the band gave us permission to use their music in the episode. And so that for me was like a total game changer, being able to weave different songs depending on what we were talking about. And I know their music so well and I kind of consulted with my son, who's a big AJR fan, like, hey, what are some songs that are about climate change or about weather or the environment? And he gave me some ideas. So we kind of wove those songs through the episode, and it was just so fun to edit. And I worked so hard on that episode. And it's one of those that I do sometimes go back and listen to, because it's also very inspirational. Yeah. Even as just not a musician or not a climate scientist, I am doing creative work. So if I'm kind of stuck creative wise, I go back and listen to that because I find it very inspirational and helps me kind of reset. AJR, the indie pop trio turning chaotic anthems into viral hits. The Billboard Music Award-winning brothers, Adam, Jack, and Ryan, have been blowing up social media and selling out arenas with hits like Bang, Weak, and The World's Smallest Violin. But what you might not know is that the band's bass player isn't just a rock star, he's a climate scientist. Now, along with his 2 brothers, he's harnessing the power of fandom to bring change to the future of our climate.
I looked at how we built this fan base, and I said, okay, what if we could do the same thing, but for the climate movement?
Today, we're going off the radar with Dr. Adam Met to explore how art and activism intersect in ways you've never heard before. bringing the climate crisis center stage to a whole new audience, one arena at a time.
A good story is one that you hear and you're like, oh, that's cool, and you'll share it with your friends and family. But an effective story will actually make you get up off your butt and do something about it.
And how fun that you got to, work with your son on that episode.
Yes, very fun. So yeah, that was great. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Healing the Hole, the Ozone's Road to Recovery. What can I say? I love a happy ending. I think it's great to celebrate some good news. Obviously, it's not like pat ourselves on the back, all the work is done. But great milestone to celebrate. And, in these times, we need all the good news we can get. So I thought this was such a cool Earth Day episode to talk about the progress that we've made and kind of what the future looks like in terms of what that continued work looks like.
Awesome. I'm glad you picked that one because I kind of forgot about it. But you're right. And I feel like that came at a time where we really needed some good news as well. So that was a timely episode and it was very uplifting. So good pick. Good pick. All right, Brian, are you ready for my number 1?
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
All right. My number 1 was a look back at Hurricane Katrina with National Geographic. So this was a really interesting episode, and I think that's why I liked it. It wasn't your typical interview. This was National Geographic reached out and they said, hey, we're doing this docuseries on a look back at Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. And do you want to interview our people involved in the documentary? And I was like, sure. I never turned down an interview. And so I think I was on vacation in Connecticut and quickly threw together my laptop and found a corner of my dad's house to go into. And I did 2 interviews. I interviewed the director of the documentary, Tracy, and then Shelton, who was a Superdome survivor. Tracy was fantastic. She kind of talked about putting together the documentary and what she learned through the process. And then Shelton was really interesting because he didn't tell his story so much to me, but he did recite a poem for me. And then we were kind of cut off and out of time. But the poem was the most important part of this. And I was thinking how do I put this together? How do I put together Tracy and Shelton and create this episode? And I had been at speaking at a conference, a storytelling conference, and I was brainstorming with some of the people there and telling them about what I had and what I wanted to create. And a lot of them kind of came up with this idea of weaving the poem throughout the episode, have it here, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. So that's what I did. And then I found some great music to kind of lay under it. It was New Orleans jazz music.
Yeah.
And so I love the flow of that episode. And, we did at the National Weather Desk, we did a 20-year anniversary special on Katrina as well. And I created a package for them that kind of went with this and teased to the podcast. So it was a whole bunch of material that all kind of went together. All this content came together and it was just a real pleasure to work on. But once again, emotional and just a good reminder of how far we've come in 20 years too.
Absolutely. No, I loved that episode. And I remember you messaging me, telling me you were struggling with the format just for how to structure the episode. And you sent over a demo to me and I was like, this is amazing. What are you talking about? This is great. So I thought you did such a wonderful job weaving those through. I thought it worked really well. And it was a very powerful episode, very emotional. I honestly didn't, going beyond the headlines of things at the Superdome and actually getting to hear about the human experience there. And that was a very powerful episode.
All right. You got a number 1?
I got a number 1. My number 1 is The Year Without Summer. This one just really fascinated me. Like I said, I haven't this background in environmental biology, and I remember learning about the Little Ice Age and some of those big climate events in my environmental science classes way back in college, but hadn't really dug into the volcanic event in detail. And so just getting to talk to, I hope I'm saying his name right, Dr. Anchikaitis.
Yeah, he was great. He did a great job.
Picture a volcano erupting. As the smoke and ash balloon upward and outward, the sky darkens, turning day into night. We tend to think of weather as being hyper-localized, like it's raining in western Washington while eastern Washington is bone dry. And when it comes to volcanoes, those events are experienced everywhere. In the year 1815, the Earth experienced the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded history. The Tambora eruption in Indonesia unleashed a staggering 80 times more ash than Mount St. Helens. And the sulfur and ash that eruption generated actually changed weather patterns for the entire planet. It reduced incident sunlight across the surface of the Earth in what came to be known as the year without a summer. Crops withered and died. Famine and disease spread. People who lived thousands of miles away from the volcano, who knew nothing about its eruption, suddenly saw ruby red sunsets in the sky every night and snow falling in June. His job sounds so fun. I know it's a lot of work and I'm sure very stressful, but it just seems so cool getting to dig into history in this way and the ways that this volcanic event in Indonesia really shaped American history was so eye-opening to me, to think that we wouldn't have farming in the Midwest if not for this volcano on the other side of the planet, over 100 years ago. It was such a wild concept to me. And it was just such a fun, interesting episode, combination of art, science, history, geology, volcanology, and weather all combined together. So it was just a really fun one for me.
It's funny because in 2024, I don't think we had a single volcano episode, but it's occurring to me now. And I think they all made the top 10. We had a lot of volcano episodes in 2025. So clearly we were like, ooh, volcanoes are cool. Let's do some more on this. And that one, I like that one too, because it's like an event that people may have heard of, but don't know too much about. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Dust Bowl episode too, where it's like, here's this event in history. We don't know too much about it, so let's learn about it to see, like, could this happen again? Because that's kind of always the question, like, could this happen again? And we talk about that. So great choice. I think that was great. I think we covered some amazing topics here too. Between the two of us, we kind of covered the good ones. There's so many more though. So I recommend everybody go take a listen to all the episodes. And also give us ideas for 2026. I don't think we're running out of ideas anytime soon. we've always got a nice running list. So, but we're open to new ideas, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Tell us what you're interested in, what you want to nerd out about. And we love doing a deep dive too. Give us more stuff to go down the rabbit hole on.
My husband keeps bugging me. He wants us to do an episode on sunsets. And I kind of argue with him. I'm like, well, that's a very visual episode for an audio medium, but maybe we can get creative and come up with something there.
That would be cool. I bet there is some interesting science behind the colors and the light reflection or refraction. And
there is. Yeah, there's some really good physics in there that we could dig into. So, well, we'll look into it. All right. Find me an expert, Brian.
I'll start looking.
Well, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for counting down this top 10-ish list of episodes with me. And thank you for all that you do for Off the Radar as well. I wouldn't be able to do this without you and your incredible writing and your attention to detail. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Happy New Year, Brian.
Happy New Year.
Now, as promised, here's a portion of my favorite episode of the year. It's a poem titled I Was There by Shelton Alexander, written from his lived experience surviving Hurricane Katrina inside the New Orleans Superdome.
I was there. What the future holds, we are unaware. Storms like Hurricane Katrina historically are rare.
You're just not going to find better people than the people in New Orleans.
Tracy Curry is an Oscar-nominated producer and director, but when she was tasked to tell the story of Hurricane Katrina, she felt the weight of the mission.
Trying to make the invisible feel visible and make the implicit feel explicit. And so this was an opportunity to do that and to also do it in a way that restores this story to the people of New Orleans.
Giving voice to those who lived it.
3D glasses might need your pair. Death, destruction, despair, you bet people were scared.
One of those voices is Shelton Alexander.
Accountability to those souls, the sole reason I share. The truth is hard, at least it's fair, sad but true, I'll take you. I was there.
The flood did not discriminate. All races, all classes, like everybody lost a lot. But the recovery is where we sort of begin to see how some of those structures and institutions create a disparate outcome for some people and not others.
But we stood in very long lines. It was a desperate time. Can't let them forget. That's why I wrote these rhymes.
We see in the story that there were some dehumanizing kind of narratives about the way the people of New Orleans comported themselves during this incident. And I hope that we've done a good job and that people understand the truth, which is that the way they responded to this incident was extraordinary.
March and sung hymns with them like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. In the Superdome, I'm gonna let it shine. God is good all the time.
These ties of kinship and community that they have in the worst of circumstances did not break.
And thank the Lord for the Air Force and the Coast Guard. Flew helicopter and rescue missions nonstop. Got people and pets off of porches and rooftops. Naughty by nature would say hip-hop parade for General Honoré. And all first responders, I have to give them props. They saved so many lives and they worked around the clock. I'm from there. I'm from where we believe in everything happens for a reason in due season. You may or may not even care.
And I hope that everyone else watches it, sees them in a way that they were not seen at the time.
They said God won't put more on you than you can bear. The Most High wanted me to be, so I was there. And that's in the past, and it may have taken a while, but I'm so glad I done got over. At last, I'm here now.
Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes publish every Tuesday. Also, please rate and review the podcast on Spotify and Apple, and give us a follow on Instagram. Just search Off the Radar Podcast. Thank you to Brian Pietrus and to every single guest that has come on the show this year. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy lives and schedules to share your amazing work and experiences with us. Thanks to the National Weather Desk and Sinclair Broadcast Group for their ongoing support of the podcast. Happy New Year, and I will see you with brand new episodes starting on January 6th. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracey. Make it a great day.